All right, this is The Earth and Its Peoples by Richard Bulliet, Chapter 28, Section 4, China and Japan, Contrasting Destinies. Now, for China and Japan between the years 1900 and 1929, both went through significant economic and social change. For the most part, when it came to China, the change ultimately led to revolution, that is, a change in government. In Japan, a lot of the change led to Japan becoming a more powerful, industrial, and influential nation. So we might say Japan continued to, we'll just say continued to expand. Let's say that, expand. Because this was something they were already doing previously. In China, one of the contributing factors to a change in government was the status of foreigners. Foreigners, especially in quote-unquote those treaty ports, which had forced China to, remember, all during the era of imperialism, outside powers like Britain, France, Germany, the United States forced China to grant foreigners unequal treaties, and this led to foreigners becoming very rich and very wealthy. And this was a place of resentment for a lot of the Chinese population who saw foreigners as pretty much taking advantage of the Chinese, which they certainly were, but then reaping all the benefits in the various cities. For Japan, their state-sponsored capitalism led to the Zaibatsu, and Zaibatsu were not foreigners, and this was the big difference. Zaibatsu were Japanese families who owned Japanese, we'll just say businesses. So yes, it is true that in Japan, there may have been some conflict between like old money and new money, right? Some of these Zaibatsu, not even in those cases, sometimes Zaibatsus were well-established families even beforehand, but not to the degree that there was the same type of resentment in China. And so in China, we had already talked about a lot of the contributing factors to China's instability. It's between these years, 1900 and 1929, that the Qing dynasty, which really had been a dynasty which experienced military defeats at the hands of the British and the French in the Opium Wars. It experienced internal rebellion in the case of the Taiping Rebellion, and it continued to reject adopting various Western technologies. The empress at the time, Empress Dowager, or Empress Dowager Cixi, as she is called, again, we talked about her. She typically was resistant to Western technology. And it was the difference between Japan, technology. It was the difference between Japan and China in that Japan adopted Western technology. The Chinese continued to resist it. But typically, Empress Cixi and other Qing rulers typically allied, historically anyway, with foreigners over the domestic population. So even in China, not only was there a lot of resentment towards outside powers, there was a lot of resentment at the Qing dynasty, which again used outside help to suppress and put down internal rebellions. And outside powers were more than happy to give the Qing dynasty the weapons and funding that it needed in order so that they can continue to really exploit that nation. So the Qing dynasty was on very, very shaky ground, population. However, that changed with the Boxer Rebellion. The Boxer Rebellion, I think 1900 to 1901, was an anti-foreigner rebellion. It was different in that the Empress and the Qing dynasty supported by the Qing. That was different, but it was crushed, right? This was crushed by, we'll say outsiders. It was a international coalition of British, French, Russian, German, American, Japanese troops that came in, put down the rebellion, and kept China into its its position of being taken advantage of. However, you had other vocal leaders in the, really in the absence of a strong and powerful centralized state in the Qing dynasty. One of the most important Chinese voices in this era was Sun Yat-sen. So he was, in some ways, a leading Chinese nationalist. It might be worth saying that in 1911, the Qing dynasty, so 1911 was the year, that was the year that the dynasty disintegrated. And so the question was, well, what is the future of China? Sun Yat-sen provided a vision for a new modern China, emphasizing nationalism, socialism. We might think of socialism not in the sense of like communism and the Bolsheviks, but in the terms of like welfare, that Sun Yat-sen wants to take care of the Chinese people, and Confucianism, and this really just means Chinese culture, that the Chinese are not going to kind of lose what makes them, what makes them Chinese, essentially, and that is culture, Confucianism, which plays a big role in that. So Sun Yat-sen in some ways provided a future for China. He's sometimes referred to as like the father of modern China. He spent a lot of time in the West, in the United States, kind of thinking about how China was going to build a modern state. However, the people who really had all the control were the warlords and the regional generals. Yuan Shikai, he was the most powerful regional warlord. Sun Yat-sen did not have control over the military. When the Qing dynasty fell apart, it was pretty much who controlled the military in the localities of China that had control. And so, roughly from 1911 through, I don't know, we'll say, maybe the 1920s or so, somewhere along there, China was very much decentralized with individual rulers trying to, establish their own, policies and laws. However, though, Sun Yat-sen, in the aftermath of not really in the aftermath of warlord rule, but Sun Yat-sen, unable to take control of China because of the power of the warlords, establishes the Kuomintang, or the People's National Party, and this becomes, in many cases, the nationalistic Chinese Party. And Sun Yat-sen can't exercise control. Ultimately, it is Yuan Shikai and the other warlords which exercise control and influence over the Kuomintang. Meanwhile, just real quick, Japan in World War I, Japan sided with the Allies, right? That is Russia, France, Britain, and the United States. And they took over German territory. So Germany lost all their colonies. The colonies in the Pacific went over to Japan. And this included some land in China, which did not sit well with the Chinese at all. Meanwhile, in China, those that protested were known as the May 4th movement. This is the May 4th movement was primarily students protesting. I would just say for a modern state of China. Eventually, it was Chiang Kai-shek, who was a military ruler. And what he did was that after Sun Yat-sen died, so Sun Yat-sen died, Chiang Kai-shek became the sort of leader of the Chinese nationalist movement. He allied with another very powerful faction in China, and that was the communists. So in China, they're essentially the nationalists, the communists, who are greatly inspired by the events in Russia, and the warlords, right? And the warlords. And this is kind of, in the aftermath of 1911, the three groups that initially are in control. At first, it's the warlords who maintain control. However, the nationalists and the communists team up with one another. They bring the fight to the warlords. They defeat them. And then the nationalists, who had initially allied with the communists and successfully ended warlord rule, as we will learn probably in the next section, they eventually turn on the communists, force the communists into exile. And eventually China goes down a path of civil war. And the Chinese Civil War is between the nationalists on the one hand, right? The Kuomintang. Actually, where the Kuomintang go? There they are. The Kuomintang is just the name of the political party of the nationalists. The Kuomintang, they're led by Chiang Kai-shek, right? With Sun Yat-sen dead, Chiang Kai-shek, who again, much more militaristic, brought the fight to the warlords. They're gone. And they are versus the communists, who are essentially in exile, and their leader, Mao Zedong. All right, and that's pretty much where 1929, where China's at.